Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, back with another episode of fine conversation with people that are involved in the independent music industry, whether it's the creation of art, whether it's the support of art. There's just a lot of support and creation going on here. Anyways, I'm your host, and this week we have a guest. His name is Shane Told, the vocalist for a band called Silverstein. More on him in a few moments. Let's get some business pleasantries out of the way, and then we'll be able to dive right into the interview with Shane. For those of you that have been paying attention, this month is my fundraising month. I try to bring the cream of the crop as far as guests are concerned, but let's be honest, I bring you great stuff all year. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. This podcast is probably one of the best out there. Let's just all agree, understand that fact right now. Even though it may not chart in the top 10 in downloads, it's just the best, Sorry, that's sarcasm there. But anyways, I come to you twice a year in April and November to essentially beg for money because this thing doesn't make money. I basically just want this to be a self-sustaining thing. So where I'm not dipping into my own proverbial pockets to pay the editor, beautiful Tom Richfield, to pay the hosting fees and all that other fun stuff. I mean, to be straight with you, it's not that much money, but it's over $100 a month to keep this thing running as smoothly as it does. So I'm coming to you, the listener. So if you are a first-time listener and you enjoy this show, just think about donating. But if you're a regular listener, you person, just give $1. Like literally $1. You have two ways of giving. One, you can be a regular contributor, so a month-to-month donation of any size. I could care less what the size is. Just sign up and do it. Or you can do a one-time contribution, and a lot of people have been doing that. A lot of people tend to kind of want to give a lump sum. Like, some people have given like $50, and it's like, that is humbling and awesome, and I really appreciate that. So click on the show notes of this show. Whatever podcast catcher or listener you're doing this on, you can find that in there. Just click it, and then click through. One or two ways to donate. The subscription model is based off of a platform called Patreon, and you can get some rewards there. But anybody that donates, I will send you some pins and stickers and essentially my eternal friendship, because I kind of develop relationships with people that either email the show or donate. I'm just so grateful that people do that I kind of, bug them. So if you don't want that, that's fine. I'll leave you alone. The second way, like I said, is a one-time donation, and you can do that on the right side of the page at 100wordspodcast.com. Yellow button on the right, click on it, pick any amount. Like I said, I could care less about what the amount is. It's just a matter of support, because there's tons of stuff out there. I'm competing with movies, music, everything. But the fact that this is in your ear holes, that is a deliberate decision. I just want to engage with you on that fact alone. So anyways, enough of the shilling. April is so busy as well because so many bands come through Southern California on tour. Just saw Balance and Composure recently. Love those guys, and they continue to impress me from a live music perspective. Just saw Defeater and Counterparts. All these people are past guests of the show, so dive into the archives. If you're new to the show, you can find so much good back catalog content there. So it's exciting, and I love to go to shows that are exciting, and you can kind of feel that anticipation building. And all these shows have delivered. And I'm just very grateful. It's always nice to reconnect with friends, and just the camaraderie and the community aspect of this music scene that I hold so dear is, it's the real deal, man. Record Store Day just happened, and I actually wrote a piece for Property of Zach. If you are interested in reading that, I was a little critical of Record Store Day. I personally love it. I'm a huge vinyl collector. But there are some things that, because Record Store Day has become successful now, it's, you got to shine a light on some corners that of the actual quote unquote holiday that, might get overlooked, because, not everything is awesome about the holiday in particular. It started off from a great place, but there are some little aspects that should be tweaked and addressed in order for it to improve in the future. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and go to Property of Zach and you'll be able to find that. The interview this week is with Shane Told. He is the vocalist for a band called Silverstein. I've known him forever. He's a good friend, and we've been trying to do this for a while. I was trying to meet up with him in person, but sometimes touring schedules just don't match up with my own schedule, and we decided to hop on Skype and do it that way. It was funny because Shane was one of the first people where I call him a show friend, where it's like, we've spent a lot of time together, but I don't know very much about him. And when I started to kind of like look around on the internet for more information on him, there isn't a ton out there, which I was kind of surprised by, because Silverstein has been a band that's existed for a very long period of time, and he's done a cajillion interviews. But so it's interesting. So we dig into a lot of other things. I'm just grateful that Shane was interested in hanging out with me and kind of, laying it all out there. So this is the definitive Shane Told interview. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But anyways, enough about me and blabbering. Let's talk to Shane, and I will talk to you after the interview is over. I've known you for forever. I can't recall the first time we met each other because it's been so long.
I can. It was at the Taken show in Southern Ontario at the merch table. You sold me a crayon 7-inch.
So that was
that's my first recollection. I'm sure you don't remember that. I was just a kid, but
yeah, but still. But I remember though. Let's see. Okay, so was that at the Pine Room?
That would have been at the Pine Room. That's right.
Okay, I'm trying to think of.
And I don't know what year. I mean, you'd have a better idea of what year you actually toured when you had that record out. Because for me, it all blends together. That might have been like 99 or something like that. It's hard to say.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say that may have been our first time up there, because I think we only played the Pine Room twice, but it was I think one of them was with Every Time I Die, maybe, and regardless. But anyways, that was the first time that we had met, and I just remember being so weirded out that people knew who we were already up there. It was like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Probably in the same fashion when you guys first came out to California, it was like, wait,
oh yeah,
wait, why do people know who we are out here?
I can remember the first, Orange County. Well, I guess maybe it's not Orange County, but Corona, California was the first, Southern California show we played. And it's funny because in my head, I look back at that show as it being this like totally crazy show. But recently I saw a video of it. There was probably about 55, 60 people there,
dude.
But in my head, it was like we were playing Woodstock or something,
people hanging from the rafters, and
that's right. Yeah. And it was really like that,
you have no perspective at that time. You just have the idea of like, there are people in front of me who are yelling and having fun at something that is foreign to me. No one should be liking my band, really.
Oh yeah. Well, the other thing is I think it wasn't that tour. It was the next tour, but we were in San Diego, and I saw the first Silverstein tattoo I'd ever seen. And to me, literally my first thoughts were, I just ruined that guy's life.
That's a huge mistake.
Because, it was, yeah. What have you done? What have I done? And that's literally the way you feel, in these situations. Because when these things are new, I'm sure when you guys when Taken was touring up in Canada, it was like, you never think this is going to be something that it means anything. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, we're just a bunch of stupid kids driving a van around, It doesn't mean anything to anyone.
Right.
Except maybe us.
You don't feel any weight to it. It's not until obviously you're a few years in it, and, you can obviously have, like I said, perspective on it, where it's just like, oh,
exactly.
Oh, I see. But so anyways, reflecting, obviously, as long as I've known you, and as long as like Silverstein has been in my life, and you guys have just, been just great friends to me as human beings, you're one of those people where it's like, we've known each other for so long, but I don't know you at all at the same time. Where it's like, I've got bits and pieces about your life. And then, so when I started doing research, obviously, about you before, this chat, and typically speaking, there's not much information about you out there. And it kind of, I don't know, surprised me in a way, because, by this time, people have spoken to you 575,000 times about the band. I just found it interesting that there was so little, I guess, kind of personal information out there about you.
Maybe I'm just really boring.
No,
I mean, maybe we should just cut our losses and end it right here. It doesn't surprise me. I'm not going to. I've Googled myself. I can fully admit I have Googled Shane Told. I have done this. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes I'm actually surprised at how little really is out there about me, both, I mean, not just negative, people shit talking me or any kinds of stories, true or not. There really isn't much. And the interesting thing about that to me is a lot of people would give a reason like, oh, I'm a secretive person, or I keep to myself or whatever. I'm really not that kind of a guy. I have no problem sharing. I don't keep secrets from people. There's never been, a time in an interview where I've said, I'm not comfortable or I've steered it the other way. I really do, just jump down people's throats and with what I feel,
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really describe why, maybe you're bad at doing your research, man.
I know. Maybe my Google results are failing me, but I just
you got to get Bing or something.
Yeah, totally. Like I said, I found it strange just because people do have such obviously an intimate bond with your band, and then obviously people always immediately attach themselves to the singer. So of course they start to overanalyze and be super analytical with it. But I mean, it was going to pose a question I was going to ask. So you, by no stretch of the imagination, would define yourself as like a private person in a way?
I wouldn't say that at all. No, I wouldn't say I'm a private person at all.
Yeah, because you seem like the sort of dude that in all the interactions I've had with you, you've obviously always been forthcoming and nice and, like willing to have conversations. So that's why I was kind of like this. It just didn't sit in my head appropriately where I was just like, that's strange. But anyways, you were born in Southern Ontario, correct?
That's correct. I was born in Scarborough, Ontario. It's actually kind of the ghetto of Toronto, if there is such a thing. I know you're from Los Angeles area, so our ghettos aren't quite the same as yours. But yeah, it's actually kind of a rough area in Southern Ontario near Toronto. And I lived there until I was about 6 years old. And then, my dad got a new job and we moved to literally the other side of town, from the eastern suburbs to the western suburbs, where it was a lot nicer, into Oakville, Ontario, which a lot of people, if they know anything about, Toronto, know that's like the richest area of Toronto.
Mm-hmm. Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have one older sister, yeah.
Okay.
She's 7 years older than me. She actually lives in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. I think you mentioned that to me before, but that's a pretty big gap in there.
It is, yeah. Well, my parents, my dad is almost 10 years older than my mom, and they were married when I was. They were married when my mom was 18, so it was, when you're a kid, you don't think of that as really strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like they're my parents, whatever. But now that I'm older, and even when I was a teenager, and I know like my mom was 16 when my parents met, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird, Dad.
Right.
What are you hanging out with high school girls for, And
because he was at his mid-20s and he was hanging out.
My dad was in grad school and he was home for the summer. He was going to University of Florida, actually.
Okay.
And he was home for summer, and he had really bad teeth. And my mom had quit school and was working at like a dental office as like a dental hygienist or something. And my dad kept going back for his bad teeth, and they fell in love. And my dad says, hey, I didn't know how old she was. She's working at a dental office. I figured she was,
right.
Old enough, and until she had to be home or like, early, and she couldn't go out drinking and stuff like that,
Right.
But yeah, so that's my parents, and they're still together. I actually had lunch with them this afternoon, so they're doing well. And my dad's turning 70 this year, so they're getting a bit older, and he was actually trying to sell his stamp collection, which is
that he's trying to get rid of that because he's basically like, I don't need this anymore.
I think so. Yeah. I think he's at the point where he's turning 70 this year, and he's kind of starting to realize that he's old.
Right.
And I think that's what's going on with my parents. They're looking at selling their, the house I grew up in. They're looking at selling it this year and stuff. So yeah, it's getting a little crazy, and a little crazy for me not having that, my parents being that support that they've been,
sure,
my whole life, because they're talking about moving away. Maybe they're going to move to Las Vegas. I don't know.
Right. You would probably define your childhood as pretty, kind of typical, normal, sort of idyllic suburban home living.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it really is. It's almost too normal in a way. The only thing I can really like think of is my mom had a drinking problem. My mom hasn't drank alcohol since I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like, I guess, a bit of trauma, in my family. And my grandfather was also an alcoholic, and there was some things like that. But a lot of that was kind of worked out before I came into the picture.
Right.
You know, it was strange too. You know, my sister's 7 years older than me, as I said. So I guess my parents were trying for a very long time to have another child, and then I came around. And you know, when your family's like that much evolved already, it's kind of like they'd already worked out the bugs in a way.
Right.
You know what I mean? They'd already figured out where they were going to live and all that stuff. And so I guess I got lucky like that.
Right. Yeah. You could come into the world with obviously not the tumultuous nature that sometimes like a first child can throw people off, especially like you said, when your mom is, you know, only 18 years old having her first kid. And that's a heavy weight to carry.
Absolutely. Right. Right.
You know, as you started to kind of, you know, define yourself and grow up in junior high and high school, you know, what kind of kid did you find yourself being? You strike me as a sort of person where, partially I'm pushing this on you, but I feel like why, you know, you and I get along, like we can kind of blend in different social groups. So like, were you the sort of guy that got along with a lot of different people at your school,
Yeah.
or was it difficult to kind of navigate those waters?
No, you know, I guess I was always very comfortable socially in any kind of group, and maybe to a fault in some ways, you know, I can think of, you know, junior high school and high school, I was kind of friends with everybody. I would say everybody considered me their friend, and I was almost part of every group, but so much that I wasn't part of any group, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. You know, like I was really into basketball growing up, from junior high all through high school. I played basketball, but you know, the guys on my team, I was never really like friends with them outside basketball, you know. Mm-hmm. And part of that was because I was involved in music and I was playing in bands and stuff. So, you know, I was going to shows every weekend, and a lot of those people, you know, I considered like my real friends, but then in a way they weren't my real friends because I was playing basketball all the time, if that makes any sense, you know?
No, I can identify with that, because actually I was thinking about that recently, where it's like, I think people like yourself and myself that tend to be able to kind of mold into any sort of, you know, social situation, and people generally speaking will leave that interaction being like, oh, that person was nice or cool or whatever, but you're not there long enough to, I guess, create those like really strong bonds that sometimes people have when it's like, all right, well, I'm not hanging out with anybody else. So yeah, I see what you're saying, where it was like, you know, everyone was cool with you, but you didn't have these like these hugely deep relationships because of just as far as the time you spent.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I can even remember like I was a member of the chess club one year. You know what I mean? Like I was into some nerdy stuff,
sure,
but I couldn't relate to those people, and they couldn't relate to me because at the same time I was going to hardcore shows. Mm-hmm. And it was like that was so foreign to them. They didn't understand what I was, you know what I mean? It was very strange how I could understand these different groups, and I could navigate them. But a lot of people, I think, had trouble relating to me as more than just, oh, hey, like I'm going to play some games of chess against this guy or whatever, you know, or I'm going to play one-on-one with this guy. Then it is like, so it was a strange high school experience for me. You know, I look through my yearbook and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I was like friends with all these people, but I don't talk to anybody now.
Right. Yeah.
You know? And that's probably why.
I can understand exactly what you're talking about.
It's also 15 years ago, too.
Right. Well, yeah.
So.
I think there's something to be said, too, about the way that, you know, you develop as a person. Like it is, I guess, easier for especially people that have had a similar experience to you, where it's like, you know, you get involved in a subculture and you start going to shows and stuff like that. It's easy for people to just kind of stay in that lane and be like, well, that's my identity. But then when you yourself are adding these other layers that don't necessarily have anything to do with the music, that's when it's, because, you know, you're not supposed to be into like punk and hardcore and like sports, you know, those are like
no, I know. It's like we were doing this last tour, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but you know, we were doing this little question and answer session, and a couple times people asked me, you know, it was generally younger people, what were you guys like in high school? The answer I gave them wasn't the answer they wanted. You know, they wanted me to say, oh, I was awkward and I was bullied and, you know, whatever, you know, they wanted to hear that I think that, and I like wasn't sure, and I was depressed, and I was cutting myself, or, you know, these people want this sort of like, I don't want to call it a romance because that's a little like fucked up to say, but they want this.
It's a character
persona. They want that character, you know? And I think the fact that I was like, well, I played basketball for 4 years in high school was like absolutely the wrong answer for them, you know, because they're like, oh, well, I can't relate to this guy anymore.
Honestly, until you just saying that right there, it never really occurred to me of that, I guess the weight of that expectation when you want the people who you are identifying with to have that same, you know, whatever journey or, you know, emotional baggage or whatever you want to call it. But that's funny that, you know, those expectations would be crushed based on that fact.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And again, I'm never going to like lie to some kid about any of my past, you know, that's not me. I'm sure I should have been making up all these crazy stories all along, so I have more to talk about in magazine interviews or whatever. But
right.
you know what I mean? It's the reality of it. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and how I grew up, and that's who I am, and I'm sure part of I guess I don't want to say my success, but part of who I am and where I've gone and where I am today is based on that upbringing, and probably largely to do me being able to navigate all these different, you know, social scenarios.
Yeah, well, and plus it doesn't, you know, a lot of the times you see people get socially stunted or not really be able to interact with, you know, whatever people outside of either their social circles or in different walks of life. That's hard, you know, especially it's like when you're growing up and you're turning into an adult, it's difficult if all you've dealt with is like two types of people. And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, how am I supposed to speak to these other people? But it's like when you've already had that experience, it makes it easier to,
Absolutely.
You know, like you mentioned, obviously you're into sports. Like, did you take your, you know, schooling or academics seriously, or was everything else just kind of at the forefront?
Yeah, I did take it seriously. You know, the way I grew up or something, you know, I said my dad was, you know, well-educated man and, you know, and my mom dropped out of high school. So I think the combination of those two kind of very opposite sides, school and all that was really important to them. You know, it was really important that I did well and stuff. So part of it was not wanting to get in trouble. And then it actually, you know, started to have a lot of pride about getting like all A's or stuff, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, I went through high school, I got pretty good grades, and I went to university and, you know, I never thought I would be a musician or like professional musician,
right?
Because a punk rock professional musician kind of just wasn't a thing.
No.
Yeah. It was funny though. I can remember actually a pretty funny story. When I graduated from high school, I was at a party and it was, you know, I talk about all these different social circles I used to be part of. Well, this was like the more punk rock scene one, you know? So this dude was having a house party and I was over there and I was talking to this guy. I don't know if you know him. His name's also Ray.
Okay.
He was in a band called Racer, and then he was in the Full Blast.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know. I know.
He was one of the original members of the Full Blast. Yeah. And he was talking to me. And he was older, right? He was like probably 25 at the time, which seeed like the oldest guy on earth. You know, for whatever. I was 18 or 19, and
right.
And he said to me, he's like, "Hey, so Shane, are you going to you know, university next year?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to University of Guelph." He goes, "Why?" I go, "Well, you know, I don't know. I got good grades and I'm going to go to university and that's just like what you do." And he's like, "You know, you're just going to play music." It was the weirdest thing. Like, I don't know how he knew that.
Right.
He really knew that, but I didn't know that. And certainly nobody around me knew that. And I mean, Silverstein had just started. My old punk rock band was marginally successful, but like we never toured or anything. You know what I mean? So I just couldn't believe that he said that to me, and I totally just shrugged it off. You know, I went to university for 3 years.
Right.
And finally, you know, when, you know, Silverstein made a demo and we got signed to Victory Records and we decided we were going to go for it, I kind of, that conversation played back in my head with this, just in a very strange way, to where I don't know how that guy, who I didn't know very well at all, knew that. It blew my mind.
Right. Yeah, it didn't make any sense because that wasn't like you were saying. You know, you were doing these steps because obviously that was what was put in front of you, and it just made sense. I mean, no matter how punk or anti-authoritarian you are, it's like it's easy to make those next steps and be like, oh yeah, I'll go to college, I'll do these things because it's prudent. It makes sense because I'm not going to make a living out of trying to play in bands. It never made sense.
No, I mean, I wouldn't know what to do.
Right.
You know, I didn't have any, as a kid, I didn't have any money. I didn't have like a place to live other than my parents' house. And I wasn't going to go up to my parents and be like, yeah, I got into these universities and I got these great grades and I've got like scholarship money or whatever, but I'm going to go buy a van now. And with my band, with other guys in my band, we're going to school. So it didn't make sense, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure.
And so, yeah, but it's just one of those funny things.
Yeah, a funny little moment. What were your parents doing for work as you were growing up? Like you said, your dad, you guys moved because your dad got a different job. What was your dad doing?
Yeah, my dad worked for DuPont.
Okay.
You know, that big faceless corporation.
Sure.
That makes everything from free. Well, actually, my dad worked with Freon in the 80s. He actually went around doing conferences about how Freon wasn't so bad.
Okay,
so,
right.
I don't know where he got a punk rock son from, but so he worked for DuPont for his entire work career.
Got it. Was your mom was your mom staying at home taking care of you?
Exactly.
Okay.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, so that was my upbringing. Pretty damn normal.
Yeah. Most people who obviously are looking for those, whatever dark secrets of why they got involved in aggressive music, it's like 95% of the time, it's exactly what your life was described as. And I mean, I'll throw in my life as well. It's like, we were relatively well-adjusted people that just were drawn to something weird, because of obviously our tastes or whatever. But it's like, yeah, there doesn't have to be this like overwhelming darkness to create screaming music,
There doesn't have to be. No, you're right. And I don't know what it is. There's a thing, I have a theory about successful people too. I think people that are successful in whatever field have a certain type of personality. You know what I mean? And generally speaking, whether they're a total, a normal upbringing or whether they're full on drug addicts or whatever, they still usually come from a certain personality. I find a certain upbringing. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think especially from, our age bracket of people, there's definitely the sort of, suburban blight of even though I have a house to live in and my parents care for me and like, there's all the building blocks are there for me to be satisfied. There's that element of just like there's something darker somewhere. Like there's that itch that I got to scratch.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
As you were starting to kind of find yourself and define your own voice, what sort of frictions were there in the household as far as like were you experimenting with, like, were you drinking on weekends and like, were you getting into trouble from that perspective? Or did you kind of, generally stick to the rules, so to speak?
I guess when I was like 16, I kind of got, my first like girlfriend, and that was maybe the point where the kind of the rebellion started where, I was, going out and drinking, and I never got super into like drugs or anything, which is probably a good thing because I had so many friends that were fucked up on drugs that I was helping them all the time that it was kind of easy for me to see early on that maybe this was something that was not going to be very positive in my life, especially with that girlfriend, So that was kind of where it started, and I was going to shows literally all the time. When I was 16, 17, I went to every show, in Toronto, and then when I could drive and borrow my mom's car, I was like, great, I could just go to I was going to 3-4 shows a week,
What did your parents do as you started to obviously get into this, weird punk subculture music? Like, were they just like, oh God, Shane, like I don't know what you're doing, but I guess you're into it, so we can't stop it? Or
yeah, well, it's interesting, because I mean, when I was about 12 years old, and my sister's 7 years older than me, right? I heard Metallica for the first time. And it was played through my sister's room, and it was the song One, with the really like fast ending, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I heard it through a room, and it was like, it like changed my fucking life, like immediately. I heard that, I was like, I don't know what that is. I want to do that. So I asked my sister, I said to her, what is that? Is that like drums? Is that guitar? What is that? I want to do that. And my sister's like, okay, I think it's a guitar. It's like getting a guitar. So I went, the funny thing was my dad actually plays guitar. Some guitars around the house, but they were like boring acoustic guitars. So when I said this to my dad, he was like very much like, okay, like I'm on board for this. Let's go try to get you a guitar. So I went to, it was kind of like an ongoing thing. It wasn't, we didn't go out to get a guitar. It was just something we talked about. And we were at a Sears outlet center, where they sell all this like
everything
from the Sears catalog.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And there was a guitar. It was a black, like kind of like a Stratocaster style guitar. And on the back, someone had written in Sharpie, $25. $25. And I think they were supposed to. They thought they wrote $250,
right. But
they wrote $25, and it was one of those outlet stores. So we picked it up, and I was all worried because it didn't have all the strings. And my dad said, don't worry, we can get strings.
Mm-hmm.
And took it home, and I started taking guitar lessons, and right away that was like all I wanted to do was play Metallica songs. And for some reason at that age, that band really spoke to me.
Sure.
And then from then it evolved to like more metal and stuff like Black Sabbath and Pantera and Megadeth and Slayer. And then I remember my sister, actually, she was more into like stuff like The Cure and New Order, Depeche Mode.
Okay.
But she actually had a couple Fugazi records.
Okay.
So Fugazi, which is very strange knowing my sister that she liked Fugazi, but that was kind of the first like punk band I guess I ever heard. And then of course that was around the time when Nirvana started getting big, and then Green Day and the Offspring. So I kind of had heard all this stuff, and then I heard Minor Threat, and that like really changed everything for me. So
so you just
that's kind of my
right.
my little history.
You all just started pulling it all in as you started to like actually go to shows and start to be like more active participant. What did your parents think as you were obviously spending so much time going to shows?
My parents kind of understood the metal thing for some reason. They didn't understand the punk thing.
I like that they were like, you know what? The metal stuff we can understand, Shane, but just what is this other stuff?
they didn't understand. My dad kept complaining, like the double time, like the NoFX, double time punk beat. My dad's like, it's off time. I don't understand. It's off time.
That's so good.
And then when when I had a band, and of course, like, your band when you're 12 or 13 or however old I was, you don't know what you're doing. Like, nobody can agree on a style of music. So we were playing everything from like metal to fast punk to everything in between, So when we would do the like double time stuff, my parents, who were kind of our only fans at this point, didn't like it,
Right.
And they always thought the punk thing was just like a phase in my life. And
Sure.
I remember I had a heated conversation one time when I was listening to The Descendants with my mom being like, I don't understand. He can't sing and the drums are all out of time.
It's so cute because they're really doing is criticizing the musicianship, but it's like there's nothing else. Like, I'm sure obviously if they understood the lyrics, they would have more objectionable material in there. But I think it's adorable that they're just criticizing the musicianship.
Well, that, and like when he's saying I like food,
That's true.
Like, can't play, can't sing, and like, what are these lyrics? I totally get it from my parents' perspective.
Totally.
So that's kind of where it was with me. And then I think they thought, like, I think they might still think this is some kind of trend,
right?
It's
a phase.
Even like as much as like a couple years ago, I always try to play my parents' like new album and like the new Silverstein and stuff, and they are always very supportive. But every time I do it, I scream. My mom's always like, I'm just afraid you're going to wreck your voice. You have such a beautiful singing voice. I'm just afraid you're going to wreck your voice.
It still comes from that total mom security blanket. Like, oh, Shane, you've just been doing this for so long. Like, it's going to happen one of these days.
But I mean, maybe she's right. I don't know.
I know, that's true.
15 years. I mean, I think my voice sounds pretty normal when I speak. I don't sound like a guy that's been screaming for 15 years, but
right, yeah, you don't sound like that guy. You mentioned obviously your first band, Antics, and you were playing guitar in that pseudo punk metal band.
Yeah, it was. Well, the band was called Jerk Circus.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah, we started the band when we were very young. I was in the 8th grade. Andy, the drummer who went on to play in the Full Blast and Boys Night Out, he was in 7th grade. So we were literally like, we were little kids, And I guess we were pretty good. I don't know. We would practice every day after school. Every day after school, we'd go to, it was in my house, in my parents' basement. My parents were cool with us making a whole lot of noise every day, and we did. And, that's kind of where it started.
That's funny because you definitely always need those supportive parents in order to be able to like allow you to practice in wherever it is, because it's like that is such a nuisance. Like a band practice is not quiet, and for parents to endure that is, I don't know, even though I obviously was afforded the same privilege as you, where it's like we practiced at our drummer's house and like they were super accommodating. But like if my kid came home now and was like, yo, Dad, do you mind if we set up in the garage? I'd be like, I don't know, man. Like, it's a tough ask, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're like the one dad, or that
Who should get it.
should really understand.
Totally. I think it's because maybe I understand too much, where it's just like, oh, I know what it's like, dude. It's gonna get really loud. As long as you do it on Sunday between 2 to 4, then we're okay.
Yeah. Well, and then next thing it's gonna be like, okay, Dad, I want this. Dad, I want this. Dad, I want a van. Dad, I'm leaving for 6 weeks, and then
Totally.
because that's happening when it's just a regular, like my dad, DuPont dad, he doesn't realize what he's getting himself into down the road.
That's true. He doesn't see the writing on the proverbial wall. He's just, yeah.
It was pretty obvious. I mean, like looking back, every single birthday, Christmas, whatever, I had an excuse to get any kind of present from my parents. It was something to do with music. It was, I was just building the collection. I want I want a guitar, I want a microphone, I want a PA, I want drums, I want whatever. And like literally every birthday from the time I was 12 till I was 21, or maybe even longer than that, I was always asking my parents for something.
Right.
Until I was taking it seriously and I was like, hey, Dad, can I borrow some money to buy a van?
Jerk Circus, I presume, kind of bled over into high school. So you guys were just kind of like playing local shows and stuff like that?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. We were just really just a high school band, and we played like every high school function. Like we had like the back to school barbecue we would play, and we had coffee houses and like all that stuff in the school. And then there was a few local shows we would play, and then when we got a little bit better and a little bit older, we were able to play some shows in Toronto, and there was a pretty good punk scene there. And then of course in the suburbs of Toronto, as was a super awesome scene where you could play at a YMCA or our equivalent of a VFW hall in Canada, and you'd have like 300 people. It didn't even matter who was playing.
Right.
So once that started happening, that's when, it got pretty real.
Right. Because you've always, Silverstein's such a strange band to me, because each one of you guys is in some respects like, businessly inclined, I would say, where it's like you guys all like care about not only the music that you create, but obviously like the path that the band takes, which is strange because usually you only have like maybe 1 or 2 dudes that are like really focused on that. And then the rest of the guys, like could really kind of care less. Did you kind of handle some of the, whatever, for lack of a better term, like business stuff of Jerk Circus as you guys were like trying to book shows and stuff?
Yeah, I did. I pretty much did all of it. For the band, and I was, I was the singer, the songwriter, the guitar player. We practiced at my house.
Right.
When we got a van, it was my van that I drove around like my car. It was like, it really was my whole thing. Maybe in some ways to a fault, because I was, and I still am, like a total psycho perfectionist about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the in a band practice, like, we got to do it again. It's got to be perfect. Or, or this drum fill, like, you did it differently that take, this time through, make sure you're consistent or whatever. So I'm like really, maybe in some ways I'm not easy to be in a band with, because I can be pretty critical.
Interesting.
So with that back then, what happened is, we got to be 18 years old. The band was getting pretty good, and we had like a local record deal, through like an indie label that was kind of putting out a record for us and getting distro, and we had a van. We were going to do some tours, and that's kind of when the other guys in my band got poached by some other dudes, and that's when the Full Blast started.
Mm-hmm.
So
was that pretty crushing for you at the time to kind of like?
It was kind of crushing to me because well, it was actually 2 bands. Jerk Circus was a 4-piece, and the first offshoot was called KWH, and the 3 other members of my band that weren't me formed this other band. It was like a ska band, so there was it was kind of like a 7-piece band with horns and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I wasn't really into ska at all, so it was kind of fine that they wanted to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool. They were all like friends from a different high school and stuff, so that was fine. And then when it happened again with the Full Blast, it wasn't all of them. It was just Bri, the bass player, who's now in Wilhelm Scream, and Andy, the drummer, who I mentioned before, who went on to be in Boys Night Out and everything. When they started the Full Blast, it was pretty tough too, especially because right away they were getting all this attention, and they were like this. Everyone thought they were going to be this like, huge band, and I was kind of like, oh, what about me,
Right.
And it was pretty hard, especially like when you're at that level. There's only so many Friday and Saturday nights in a month.
Mm-hmm.
to play shows. So I was like, okay, can we do a Jerk Circus show? And they were like, oh, well, we're going to do a Full Blast show. So there started being conflicts with that stuff. And that's actually why Silverstein became a thing.
Right. Because you wanted
because I was, because basically all the guys in my band were playing in other bands. And I was like, well, I guess I can try to be in another band too. And that's exactly how Silverstein started. And you'll probably hear, oh, Silverstein started as a side project. And that's exactly why, because I was in another band and so was Josh. And, so that's how it all came about.
Yeah. And so when you obviously, when you started to, sing for Silverstein, and it was obviously just you holding a microphone without the, defense of a guitar, was that because that's a weird transition for people.
It was totally weird. Yeah, it's totally weird. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, like, running around. Like, I just wasn't used to it because I wasn't able to for so long. I'm like, oh, I have to stand in this one place to sing into a microphone. Now I don't have to do that anymore. So at first I didn't like it, but after a few, even just, maybe 5-6 shows into the band's career, I was kind of like, this is kind of awesome.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not locked down anywhere.
I don't have to tune anything. This is great,
Right.
And it was interesting though how right away I started singing differently. Because I wasn't playing guitar maybe, and that's when maybe I was able to focus more on singing and singing with a certain style, whereas with my old band I just trying to play and sing and hit the notes,
Yeah, because since you were doing so many things at once, you were just like, I gotta just do all of these. Like, okay, like I can't. I guess you couldn't really have time to focus on being like really good at like one or two of those things because you were doing so many at once.
Well, part of it too is when you're a kid, you're taught like just don't make any mistakes, right? Don't make mistakes, and everything will be okay. So it was more like, okay, I'm just going to hold this guitar. I'm going to try to play everything perfectly. I'm going to sing, and that's it. There was no like, oh, well, what about expression? And what about, So I think when I was given a microphone and I could run around and I wasn't, half my performance wasn't tied to playing guitar, I think it helped me as a performer and a musician, at least to understand that there was more to it,
The history of Silverstein is well documented, so I'm not going to, pick out all of these, minutia moments of like, what did it feel like to release your first record? Because that's been asked many times. But as me personally on the outside, as I watched, Silverstein start to, you guys start to tour the U.S. regularly and starting to, make a name for yourself. The one thing that, and I've had discussions with almost every single one of you guys about this, like especially more towards the early years, where it was like, I found it so funny because obviously you guys paid so much attention to the United States, but then in Canada, I wouldn't be as dramatic as to say like ignored, but your shows just didn't do that well up there, comparatively speaking to the States. Was it funny for you guys to kind of see that switch of just like, oh, well, I guess we're doing pretty cool in the States, but I guess we're not that quote unquote cool in Canada?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. With the whole, I don't know how many of your listeners are from Canada or understand the Canadian music industry, but it's really, really, really fucking weird. And
it is.
It's really, really weird. And how it works is 35% of the music played on like TV or radio or whatever has to be Canadian. So there's an entire Canadian music industry basically that just revolves around these bands that are only big in Canada, that pretty much only anyone knows about in Canada, and they're like huge and they play arenas, and they have no career in the rest of the world. We didn't want to be that band. Mm-hmm. So for us, the whole thing was when we got any kind of seriousness about the band, we were like, we want to do something in the US. There's 10 times more people. There's so many more places to go, and if you can make it in the US, there's always the trickle up effect, if you will, of that. So what happened was, the best example of it is, we started getting big in the US, and there was a band called Alexis on Fire, who I know you know very well.
Yep.
That was very, very big in Canada. And they were kind of on the trajectory that they were going to be one of those bands that's going to be like huge in Canada and no one's going to know about them anywhere else in the world. You know what I mean? Because they had signed to a Canadian label. They had done all those, big Canadian stuff. They started getting Canadian video play, radio play, and all that, right? So it was interesting for us because we had been doing so well in the U.S., and the U.S. is like the mecca, the big thing, and we were quite jealous of Alexa on Fire for being big in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
and they were really jealous of us for being big in the US.
I do. I remember that push and pull of just like, it was so weird to watch both of you guys, obviously ostensibly were from the same scene and essentially, were very similar sonically, to have these like really wildly diverging paths. And it was weird to watch that, where it was just like, oh, I mean, I saw why it happened, like you said, everything that you're saying, but then it was like, it still at the same time, just, it felt so weird and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. I think from their perspective, it was even weirder because what they did made more sense. Okay, you start in a city, let's say Toronto, and you work the radius and you get bigger and bigger and bigger around your radius. And for us, it was like, well, we started in Chicago basically because that's where Victory was.
Right.
So we were as much a band from Chicago as we were a band from Canada. I think they had trouble understanding why we were bigger than them. And for us, it's like, well, we're from Canada, but we didn't, we didn't understand at the time. We didn't have a Canadian label. We didn't have like a Canadian manager. We didn't have anything like that in Canada. So it just took a lot longer. And part of why we ignored Canada for so long, and to be honest, we still kind of ignore Canada, is because it's just so big. To go from one side to the other, it's as big as the US, and there's like, between Toronto and Vancouver, there's like literally like 6 places you can play.
Totally.
Literally. So if you go to, and the problem is once you get to Vancouver, well, you have to come back, So
yeah.
So we just avoided BC altogether because it's like playing Vancouver is like 24 hours out of the way,
right,
if you're doing a Canadian tour. So we just didn't bother playing.
Yeah, no, totally. Something else that I think is funny and about you guys, and obviously what a lot of people, maybe might not have noticed over your career, is the fact that, relatively speaking, it's like for a band that's existed as long as you guys have and obviously have been on multiple record labels, like all of these different scenes and waves of different musical genres passing by, you guys have remained relatively like, unscathed by drama. You don't have this long laundry list of ex-members and all these other people who are just like, oh, well, dude, Silverstein was on Victory. Like that must have been hell. Like, you guys, and maybe it's just because it's reflective of your personality as a person and obviously as a band in general. I guess there's no real question wrapped up into it, but it's like, I don't know, I just find it so compelling in a way because it's like you guys are doing what most bands want to do, and that's be a band. But sometimes that's so hard because there's so much other stuff that gets put in the way. But
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, like Victory is a struggle, in a lot of ways. Not because they're a bad label. I mean, they know how to sell records. They have some of their staff over the years were fantastic at their jobs and as people. The real issues we had with Victory was just that a lot of things were a struggle. Everything we wanted to do or they wanted to do ended up being some kind of there's always a drama attached to it. Like, we want to do this video or whatever. No, and it's like ultimately they're going to say yes, or ultimately it's going to happen. It's just like, can we just get to that right off the bat?
Right.
It's just we wasted so much time, arguing or fighting over things that were going to happen anyways, that it just started at the end. It just became annoying. It was just the day-to-day thing became annoying. I would, and I know Tony's probably going to listen to this or hear about this and email me and that's fine because I'm just being honest. That's part of the reason that we left the label, and we went with Hopeless because Hopeless was like the complete opposite like that. They were just like, do whatever you want, buddies with us. I mean, I know all those guys really well. Mm-hmm. They were just like so cool. It's whatever you want to do, a 7-inch, great. You want to do an EP before the record comes out, sure. Do whatever you want. We'll make it happen. And it was awesome with Hopeless, and now with Rise, it's kind of like I think we're in maybe a little bit in between. They're letting us do what they want, but they also have a very strong opinion about what the best thing to do is, and we're kind of working together with them. So
it's really hard to do what you guys have done. Like that's the one thing that I always go back to, where it's just like, okay, you start the band when you're really when you're young, and you obviously have a very set taste in what your music should be. And then obviously as you grow up, you start to experience different styles of music, where it's like people would look at probably each individual member's own personal tastes and be like, why the hell do you guys play the music you play? Because it's like, all right, whatever. Here's, Billy with a huge hot water music aficionado. that's where his heart lies musically. And then, you've got Paul with his, indie rock background. And then, you have you who are kind of across the board. And then John, like basically everybody just has their own distinct tastes. And obviously that's kind of what makes the band a band. But to be able to, like, I guess, grow into the band that you are, I don't know. It's just such a strange thing for me to have watched you guys do.
It's strange, but part of the problem too is, like, people don't understand is we were never trying to be like a hardcore band or a punk band or anything. A lot of people will like, we did the American Nightmare cover, right? We did like an Orchid cover, which was like even worse. Like, people talked so much shit on us, because they think we don't understand, or they think we, that we don't know what we're doing. Kind of like when You're My Butterfly, Sugar, Baby, what the hell was that band called?
Crazy Town. Yeah.
When they covered Refused, right?
Right.
Everybody got so mad, because they're like, well, those guys are idiots and they don't, it's like, I don't know. Maybe those guys know punk rock. I don't know. Maybe they know, and maybe they didn't set out to try to start a band like Refused. Maybe they set out to start a band like they did, and that's what they wanted to do. And so for us, that's what it was. We'd all been in punk bands, hardcore bands, whatever. Silverstein was something different. And I know it's funny to say it's something different now when there's been so many bands over the years that have essentially done what we've done. But that was where we came from. So I think part of why you asked, part of why we've been together for so long and there's hasn't been drama or anything too. I think our music is diverse enough in itself that we have a creative outlet for whatever we're trying to do. For example, like, the newest song we released is like pretty fast and pretty heavy. It's like kind of like a hardcore song, but then at the same time, we're able to have in our band, we were able to have like an acoustic song on this record. We're able to have more like a pop punk style song on the record. We're able to have, we've done total straight up punk rock songs before. So it with that diversity just within our band, somebody can be like, I want to do this. And most bands it wouldn't work. And most bands would be like, well, this isn't what we do. This isn't whatever, but in our band, we're able to do it. And I think we're able to find a creative outlet within our band.
Yeah. And it also seems too, you guys seem to be able to obviously lead, just because you've known each other for so long, you guys seem to have very healthy boundaries. Like, when you're off tour, you guys obviously let each other, go your separate ways and kind of, do your own things without ever kind of having that suffocating pressure of just like, dude, so I got to wake up and see these four schmucks again and again and again, do you feel, was that something that was kind of like learned over time, or did that just like, I guess, kind of occur naturally?
It occurred naturally, because when we started the band, we didn't really know each other that well. Like the guys, like, for example, Jerk Circus, my old band, I lived on the same street with Bry, like, since we were 5 years old. They were like, I played basketball with Andy sometimes. Like, we were all very, very close knit. We would play music and then we would like go outside and play basketball, or we would go bike riding, or we would go, you know what I mean? We spent all of our time together, and the band was just part of the time we spent together because we were best friends. When Silverstein started, it wasn't like that at all. We were there. I only saw them when we were practicing, or when, we were playing shows at first, and we weren't really even friends in a way. If that's, I know it sounds weird to say, but we were just doing that together.
Yeah.
And then as we became closer, we still all had because we were old, and like I was 19 or 18 or whatever when we started Silverstein. So I still had at that point I had established my group of friends, and kind of everybody had. So it was like, okay, Saturday night, well, I'm going to go hang out with my friends or whatever. And that's just how it was. And as the band grew and grew, it was still always like that. I still see guys. I hung out with Paul Mark yesterday. I see Bill all the time, but we don't see each other like all the time. We don't end up at the same bar every night,
right?
Like, when we get off tour,
Yeah,
it's not like that.
You don't live on top of each other, because sometimes it's that can kind of suffocate a band when it's
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Just recently come off, an anniversary tour and that sort of stuff. Almost every interview, I see people always being like, "Oh, how have things changed, and how do you feel like you've changed as people?" And I think that's obviously it's a sort of easy and cliched question to ask, but it is one of those things that, over the past couple of years, I've been able to see you guys evolve to not be that band that is overstaying their welcome. Because I'm sure like that's every band's fear, like if they exist over, whatever, 7-8 years, then they start to question like, oh man, are we going to be one of those bands that's like, touring for touring's sake and like not really even kind of caring about what we're doing? But you guys have evolved where it's like, you obviously take younger bands on tour and you do these things that kind of like ingrain you to a younger audience and stuff like that. And I presume that's probably really exciting for you guys to do too.
It is exciting. And again, like the whole point of the band is to have fun. There's no, like we always said, when the band isn't fun anymore, we're just not going to do it.
Right.
And I'm not going to name names, but there are bands that we came up with and stuff that are still out there doing it. And it's like some of the stuff they're doing, I don't really know if they're having fun anymore. It's because sometimes it gets a little like depressing to watch.
It's so sad.
Yeah, it gets sad. And we would never wanted to be in a situation where that happened. And if it ever does, you take a good hard look at yourself. Look, I always said this Silverstein, maybe it is the most important thing in my life. Maybe when I'm on my deathbed, it'll be the thing I remember most about my life. Maybe not, but there will be other things in my life too that will define me as a person. So I don't, I'm going to do this as long as I'm having fun and enjoying it. And it's something that whatever the word is, is inspiring to me. But when it's not anymore, then I have no qualms about letting it go. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe that's why it's lasted so long, because I felt that way.
No, that's a healthy outlook. I think. Did you ever struggle though when obviously I'm putting some of my own experience into this question as well, where obviously once attention starts to get paid to you, and especially, identifying with what you go through in regards to, being the lead vocalist, where it's like people by default pay attention to you and, a lot of things are thrown your direction. When did you kind of start to see that there were people who obviously like wanted to know you because you were Shane from Silverstein versus who actually wanted to know you because you were Shane Told, like how did you start to kind of navigate those waters as you started?
Know what? I don't know if I ever navigated those waters, and I don't know if I still navigate those waters now.
Okay.
I've always been kind of bad at that I guess I don't see if people have ulterior motives. I don't really see it. So if somebody comes up to me and is just like chatting me up, I'm just friendly back and I just talk to them like I'm a person. I never think, oh, they're talking to me because I'm this guy or whatever. I'm just as likely to have a chat with somebody at the bank that I don't know, or whatever, like at the, wherever. That's just how I am. So it's always been difficult for me to see that when people are like, oh, like this person's like using you or whatever. And like, I have friends that used to be fans and they still like hit me up and like are freaking out about the new song. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then I remember, oh yeah, like I started talking to them. They were a fan and now we're friends, but I guess they're still a fan.
Right.
But I never think about that really.
Right.
So for me, I've always been a very sociable person. I've never been guarded at all. And so I guess I don't really have an answer because
you just don't do it.
You ask, the cliche question that you didn't want to ask was that I'm going to answer was, how have you changed? And it's like, I haven't fucking changed.
Yeah.
And it's so easy for people to say, oh, I'm like the same guy I've always been. And like, despite everything we've gone through, like, I really don't feel any differently, except maybe I'm like, I'm older and I have a little more life experience and stuff. But like, really, personality wise and all that, I don't know.
I guess kind of wrapped up in that identity question. There's never, or maybe at one point there has been where you kind of buy into your identity, where it's like you obviously your self-worth is determined by how well your band is doing or some variation of that. Was there a learning curve from that perspective where you were like, oh, if the band isn't doing well, like I'm worthless? Like, did you have to wrestle with that?
That's an interesting question. Again, I like never really thought about that, but part of it too is that I've been so immersed in the band that really like I haven't had a second even to like reflect back on it in
Sure,
that way.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like we've always been so busy, and there's never been a time. Like, I mean, our band has been very consistent. There was never really a time I can remember where it was like, holy shit, no one's coming to our shows. No one's buying our records. No one cares. my Twitter feed is blank. No notifications.
Right.
You know, this never happened. It's never really happened that way. You know, so I think that I haven't really worried about it, and if I have, I've just been too busy to notice.
Yeah, well,
or
what
care really.
Well, what are you running from then, Shane? If you're keeping so busy, then what are you running from? No, just kidding. The last thing I want to hit on was the because of anybody's kind of like commitment to, you know, independent music and your attention towards that scene and what have you, there's a tendency to, you know, kind of burn out on it, in the sense of, you know, people kind of filter in and out of bands, and, you know, they either become like jaded or bitter. For as long as I've known you, I've really never kind of seen that on you or seen you wear that emotion. Is that, you know, is that true? or is it one of those things where it's like there's been moments where you've been pretty hardened and you've kind of wanted to, you know, throw your hands up in frustration?
To give you another cliche answer, but like, I really feel like I'm lucky to be here. Even after this long, I still, and all the work I've put in and all the success we've had, and how much of it's related back to me and like my own doing, I guess, I still feel lucky to be here. And I still feel like privileged, and every day I wake up and I'm like, this is pretty awesome. You know, I don't have to go you know, I don't have to go do some job I don't like. You know, I can still do this, and there's never really been a time where I'm like, fuck this, fuck these people, I want to get out of here. I can really on like count the number of times when I've been upset and frustrated and had any thought in my mind of changing the trajectory of on like fingers on one hand. You know, I can remember one time being in like the UK and being sick, just having a miserable time. We did like 3 weeks in the UK, which is to me is my nightmare. It's like it was my nightmare. You know, that was about as close as I was ever to being like, I got to go home. Like seriously, get me on the next flight. That's about as close as it's been. And really, like, I've really taken every day as, you know, as a gift, I guess, and made the best of it. And I think like every record we've done, I think has been good. I think you know, the songs on all the records have been for the most part pretty good, and everything the shows, you know, we try to do everything to the best of our ability. And I think that reflects back just on us overall being really happy with everything. You know, I think when you're happy and you're in a good place, then you tend to have success.
Right. And yeah, and then you don't have to wear the, you know, the hardness on your heart or whatever, because I think something that I've noticed about your band too, it's like, while you are popular, you guys never hit it to the point of where it was like a supernova, where it was like, oh my gosh, like they're the biggest thing since sliced bread. And then all of a sudden the band has to reckon with that fact and be like, okay, well, this is going to crash down at some point. And
that's right. We never had a hey there Delilah or anything.
Right. No, totally. Because it's like, that's such a difficult beast to wrestle with, because everybody wants that. But then when you get it, you're like, what are we going to do to keep that fire going? And sometimes, well, most of the time you can't.
No, I mean, I guess yeah, you're right. Everyone does want, that is a very good perspective on it. I don't know. We've never had a big song. We've had some albums that did well, but, you know, that's always kind of a different thing. But no, we've never had like a big hit song or anything, you know, and a lot of times, I mean, a lot of things we've just never really tried, you know. We had some songs like played on MTV at one point, and I thought that was going to translate into, you know, something bigger, and it never really did. And that was fine, because we've always managed to keep not only just like a core group of fans that have given a shit about us, and maybe they wouldn't have given a shit about us if we had that supernova, as you say. And at the same time, we've been able to, you know, kind of turn our fans over. You know, there's been a turnover of younger and younger fans that just have found out about our band somehow, and they're always there. You know, even this this anniversary tour,
right?
There's kids like 12, 13 coming out. It's like crazy to me,
right?
You know, that I don't know how they heard about the band, but, you know, so I guess like however it's happened, it's been probably more of a blessing than a curse.
Yeah, totally. Like I said, you guys don't have to, you know, you don't have to do things that might be outside of your comfort zone in order to sustain something that is really difficult to sustain. You know, you guys have been able to just like, you know, continually build the, you know, brick wall. You guys have been building, you know, brick by brick, rather than like,
yep.
Oh God, we got to build this house by tomorrow. Like
that's right. No, exactly. But, you know, part of it too is just like managing our expectations. Like some bands freak out over the smallest things. And if you just start freaking out over every little small thing, it's just going to compile and it's going to be, you're going to lose it. We've always been very, very realistic. And in the early days, you know, we'd drive to play a show and the promoter would be like, yeah, it's going to be crazy. There's going to be like 300 people. And we'd be like, okay, well, rather than expecting 300 people, we're going to expect like 100. And then when there's 200, we're going to be really stoked rather than it going the other way around. So it's like, no expectations, you can't be disappointed.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
I'm not going to, like when the label, like the last record, the label's like, yeah, we got bad news. The album's not going to be carried in Target. I don't give a shit about Target.
Right.
If I start worrying about all these like little things like that, like I'm going to go crazy. Part of it is just like, whatever, man, like control what you can control, which is the songs, you know, decisions about like what label you're going to sign to, and then how you're going to treat people and how you're going to be on stage. Like those are things actually in the control. And then you have to let the other things take care of themselves. And you can't get bummed out and worried about like everything going on, you know?
Dude, that's such an important point, because that's like the managing expectations thing is one of the most difficult parts of like being in a band, being in the music industry. Like that's all that most of it is, you know. It's just making sure that everybody's expectations are kind of like matching up with one another, so there isn't this like huge dramatic swing of like you know, using, what do you mean our records aren't at Target? Like I'm gonna fucking kill you. Like, you know, it's like, whoa. Like oh, I didn't know that was such a big deal to you, so I guess we as a record label have to try to figure this out or whatever. But if you know, I wouldn't even call it like, you know, like lowballing your expectations. I think it's tempered. It's tempered with reality, where you're just like, well, yeah, of course, maybe that'd be rad if 300 people were here, but I'm not expecting that, because that's like, you know, that's like next level shit. So yeah.
Well, I mean, we've always been that band. We've always planned for the worst. Even this last tour, which was like really, really good for us. Like we sold out just about every room. On purpose, we put ourselves in rooms that were scalable. You know what I mean? Like in New York, we played a room that was anywhere from 500 to 1,500, just because we didn't know, and we didn't want to be in a situation where it's like, oh crap, like this was like no one cares about this record, and we ended up selling at the 1,500 cap room. We probably could have just done, you know, but the whole time we've been like, well, let's make sure we have these other options, and that's just the way we've always done things. So I don't know, maybe that's part of, you know, our whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah. You guys, you know what? You guys are just way too practical, Shane. That's
right.
I'm just very disappointed in your practicality.
I know, man. It's just I wish I had more exciting things to tell you about, other than like maybe this record we might get the album in Target.
Right.
And then who knows, man? The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. You
maybe
guys,
even Walmart. I don't know.
Exactly. Then you guys on tour with Taylor Swift, and then the world implodes on itself, right?
What do you mean Taylor doesn't like us?
Exactly. Well, Shane, I really appreciate you hanging out with me.
It's been great. Yeah, thanks, Brad. Nice to catch up.
For sure, man.
So that's what's up with Shane, and who is the person, and Silverstein in general. Because I mean, dude, they are the real deal. They've been at this for a long time, and then also through so many changes within the music community around them, but they haven't changed themselves. You know, they've gotten better as a band, but the records are very, very consistent, and it's kind of refreshing when you have a band like that who's just like, you know, they just keep getting better, and they just keep getting better live, and they don't really slow down. It's awesome. Big props to Shane. The producer, as always, for this show is Tom Richfield. We are in fundraising month, so if you're still listening to this and you're maybe considering donating, please just jump right in there. Give $1, give $2, give whatever you feel that this show is worth. So, and you can do that, just click on the show notes, and whatever podcast tag you have, we'll be able to do it very easily and directly from there. So, until next week, be safe.